I'm back from COD Next, and we're going to talk about the Black Ops 6 integration to Warzone. Now there's a bunch of information out there. I think people missed out on a lot of changes coming with the integration that will also apply to Urzikstan. There's definitely a lot of new information to talk about. I think kind of got glossed over about because we played a Resurgence map. It's awesome I had the opportunity to go ahead and participate in COD Next, but just because I get these opportunities doesn't necessarily mean that I turn my filter off when it comes to giving honest feedback. Following the channel for a while, you know I kind of thrashed MW2, hard MW3, Vanguard, MW20. I have no problem trashing the game where it's not disrespectful. And to give you just a little bit of perspective for those of you that never watched my content, I started playing Call of Duty back in Call of Duty 4, Modern Warfare, the original, and I was a total casual. I played it all throughout, and I didn't really get into content until around IW and World War II, even though I played every COD up until that point. And then now I have that dual perspective of what it was like as a casual, and then obviously the back end as a creator that was trying to sweat lobbies. And now at 36 years old, a little bit of a different perspective as the maybe that older gamer getting into it, even though there's much older, much younger players that play Call of Duty. It gives me a little bit of perspective to kind of understand where Warzone's at, where it's going, where it's been, and really understand that it'll never be back to what it was. I know that's kind of a meme at this point where people tweet out, make videos saying Warzone's back. The reality is it'll never be back. The perfect storm of everything that happened when it came to Warzone 1, initially being a battle royale that was very COD centric, which hadn't happened before. Blackout was still more BR centric, which is fair for people who enjoyed that. Then we got into COVID, so it was lockdown. You had people gaming that weren't really even gamers. You had musicians, football players, all general athletes, and just regular people not having to go to work or not able to go to work and being able to stay at home and have something to do to fill that time. And they became gamers. No competition for Warzone at the time. So it was really a unique scenario. Everything was new. So everything felt fresh, no matter what aspect of the game, every POI. And you're never going to have that again. It won't exist. On top of that, we ended up having integration with MW2, which did irreparable damage. We don't really need to talk on that one too much, but I spent essentially a year and a half bashing the game, explaining like 90% of my content, which is basically talking about how miserable the game was. And they need to go backwards to include some of the stuff that they removed while still leaning forward. And I think BO6 definitely leans in that direction once you get the idea of everything that's going to be available to you and the direction that they're going with the game. Based off of my initial impressions, I feel like BO6 integration, obviously we played in alpha, so it wasn't a full-blown version of the game that we're going to get in season 1. And I know that's only a few months out, but the alpha build we're playing is already outdated. They've already improved upon it. They just give us a stable build to essentially play with at COD Next, give people an experience of what the game is all about. Again, I think it will be good. It has the potential to be great, but it definitely will not be back. Warzone's back. That's just not going to happen. The most interesting part, which like I think carries a lot of the conversation, even though there's a lot of other things going on we'll get into, but it's the Omnimovement. This is a very unique concept that allows the game to be played a little bit differently, and it's going to take a while to get used to. You can't expect to pick this up in 5 seconds and just master it. It might feel good initially, and you might go, okay, I think I got a good grasp of this. It's going to be one of those things that's really easy to pick up, but it's going to be hard to master. Especially some of the advanced tech. And the part that casualizes it is pretty easy to learn. You step in any direction, you got all these assist settings to allow it to be as seamless and easy to use pretty much for all players. But if somebody wants to take it up a notch and really master the movement, then they can go out of their way to practice specific tech that will be very competitive in specific scenarios. It's not going to just be something you spam around the map. When you're playing the beta, that's probably what you'll do. But the reality is you got to kind of learn how and when to utilize this, because it's not like broken by any means. There are obviously some ways that people will learn to probably break it, but in general, it's not broken in the sense that you can't fire instantaneously. You can't ADS instantaneously. Way faster than we're accustomed to in a lot of the games we had. Warzone 1, we couldn't even dive. So like that's a whole other thing. This one, you can have opportunity with the dedicated melee to have unlimited sprint. So then you're not going to even need to do a slide cancel mechanic unless it's in the middle of a gunfight. And then you can dive and do, like, you're going to have so much flexibility to literally play how you want. And it's in the infancy of the Omnimovement, and I bring that part up because in 2019, when we got the alpha, it was the 2v2 gunfight. All the feedback was the game looks great, but it plays like trash. The movement feels clunky. That's like the generic baseline description of how movement is the first time you feel it. And then all of a sudden it's the most goated movement ever. They didn't change anything. It's just people learned how to utilize the movement and really understand its strengths and weaknesses and lean into the strengths and then limit those weaknesses to be able to really explore how the movement could be. And that essentially became the gold standard that everyone's like, oh, why can't we just go back to doing that? Well, when that first came out, everyone was complaining. So we won't really know until more people get their hands on it. People really get to play test more than the hour we had. And the other component is you got to unlearn your current behaviors. Like, oh, I'm forced to slide cancel all the time in Modern Warfare 3. It was the same thing in Modern Warfare 2019. MW2 really didn't have the capacity to do that. It had its own issues. But this, you might not even necessarily need to do that at all. So you got to kind of relearn some of the muscle memory, whether it's, hey, I want to navigate from point A to point B. You pull out the dedicated melee, you get the unlimited attack sprint, and then you don't need to spam anything. You just literally run across wherever you need to cross. And just like a lot of other CODs, this isn't like a mandatory movement system. And what I mean by that is you don't have to go around just diving and sliding and all these other things. If you're a little bit of a slower player, a more tactical player, you can still do that. Because gun-on-gun action is still the #1 way to win gunfights. Obviously, someone might try to do an outplay, be a little bit unpredictable. But if you're getting shots on targets and you're hitting your shots, you're winning those gunfights. That's as simple as it is. The longer TTK, the more likely that is to happen. Obviously, you might get caught off guard, get shot, whatever. Multiplayer's TTK is pretty fast, a little bit faster than Cold War. It's just part of the build of the game. There's going to be a little bit of nuance in that where you're going to kind of get acclimated to it and go as far as you want or as little as you want, and you just tune your settings to make sense to how your playstyle is. And I think this is a big differentiator where, although the movement's like forefront and like being hyped up and all these things, the reality is you don't need to do a lot of those things. You can really play however you want. So that little slogan like, oh, we're making the game for everyone in MW2, it's like legitimately the case in this game where you'll still be able to play how you want. There'll still be tons of campers. There'll still be tons of sweats. There's gonna be tons of everything in between, and you can literally play however you want. And they've even reinforced this through the perk system and all that other stuff in multi that will carry over to Warzone. You'll still be able to do a lot of the stuff you like, and they'll probably even be able to synergize better builds to fit your playstyle. And like we've been asking for a couple years now, is we wanted the backpack gone. I think in general, that's general consensus to simplify the game. There's obviously people that can argue for a backpack system, but generally there's way more cons associated with that. And I think they've delivered on countering some of those. Back in Warzone 1, we had the satchel. You went from 5 plates up to 8. Now your default is 6. If you get the satchel, it goes up to 12 to account for us having the spoiled by the backpack where you could have 12, 15 plates and be like, cool, I'm comfortable. They gave us that. The ammo situation, you're like, damn, I'm used to holding an extra spare ammo for my rifle because long range engagements or my shotgun or whatever. Now you can pick up a satchel at the same time as the other satchel and you're going to be able to get double ammo. So it kind of solves that without having all this inventory mess. You'll be able to run over the ammo, get all the ammo you want. You're going to be able to stack up with the simplicity of not having to do menu managing and all those little microseconds where you're doing inventory management. Even if you're proficient at it, if you're not, even longer, but even if you're proficient at it, it's all these little microseconds add up to slowing down your rate of play that we had in Warzone that didn't exist. We didn't have to worry about like, oh, okay, let me pick up munitions, self-revive, let me get a spare one, let me get 3 UAVs, like now it's like, okay, all my spots are full, I'm good. Move on to the next gunfight. Let's reposition to the next gunfight. And it's gonna speed up the pace of the game in the sense where you're actually playing the game more instead of trying to do a looting simulator. It never went full-blown hardcore battle royale in that sense. It got pretty close in Warzone 2 with the bigger backpack and all these other looting from the bag. But clearly that was the wrong choice because they've diverted back, but also incorporated some of the learnings that we got over the past couple of years to actually give us a better version than what we had originally in Warzone 1. And I think that's a little bit more objective that is an improvement on the original system we had. Next one is a little bit of a toss-up. Some people didn't really say they noticed it. I felt like from a player perspective, it felt like there was less visual shake, not zero like Warzone 1. So I don't know if that'll ever be the case, but it'll be interesting once we can create our own classes. I think this was one of the big struggle points for people to like separate their multiplayer experience from the Warzone, because the beta was full access to attachment and you can modify things. but the alpha for the new Area 99 didn't allow for that. You weren't able to mix and match perks. You couldn't put on the ones that make you move faster. You couldn't speed up your gun. You couldn't lower some of the visual shake and recoil and change the optic. You didn't have any flexibility and customization, so you're kind of just at the whim of whatever those default loadouts were. And I think that's where it led to a lot of confusion. And I saw this in people's chats when I went back and looked back when I was talking to different creators. They're like, oh, the movement in multiplayer feels way better than Warzone. Even though we were told, and I talked to several devs about this specifically, all the movement in multiplayer and in Warzone is 1-to-1. And if you're not really familiar with what that means, it means it's identical in every single way. So the only way it's different is going to be through attachments and perks. And most of the sweaty players that you probably watch, they're running all red perks, which gives you a speed boost, it gives you extra stamina, it gives you all kinds of other crazy stuff that just make you feel like cracked out, like you're playing Blitz. Well, of course, when you don't have those and you didn't build your class setup in Area 99, it's going to feel slower. And then I would follow up and, okay, cool. So you didn't have the perks, so that's probably why you felt slower. Did you try Specialist? Yeah, I was cracked out. And that's even without the setup. So I think that one's a little bit more wait and see. They are supposed to be 1-to-1. So whatever you can accomplish pretty much in multiplayer, you should be able to accomplish in Warzone. Warzone for the first time is also going to have a dedicated camo, which is pretty sick. And what we found out today is that it's not tied to levels of the gun. So you can actually start grinding your camos right off the bat. You don't have to worry about min-maxing leveling if you're going for your camo grind. You can go through the various camos hopefully by the time you're done with the grind, you leveled up the gun. But it's not like you have to be forced to, oh, I have to level up in this mode and then go to this mode. Now, of course, that makes the grind a little bit easier. We'll still have to see what all the challenges are. But in general, I think that's a huge quality of life change where it just allows you to play the game, do your camos if you want, organically level. If you happen to level up faster in one mode or the other, it's not as important in the beginning, especially if you're going for camos, where normally you're like, okay, I have to do this method that is the fastest for XP, and then I got to go do my camos. Now it's like, you camos wherever. If you play different parts of the game, you're going to max level those guns organically. There's also changes to different tacticals and lethals, which we'll be able to experience more. I think they nerf smokes, they buff stims. Not crazy like Caldera crazy, but way better than we currently have in MW3. They got rid of the Guardian, they got rid of Mosquito Drone, they reworked how the Mortar Strike worked. There's all these different little working parts that are changing, but in those short span, maybe people don't even notice, oh, the little details here. We could pick up perks again, so you get your little base perk package. You get 3 perks. Out of 18, you could pick whatever you want. You get this little wild card system, which some of it we've talked about a little bit. You could either do overkill, so you get 2 primary, 2 secondary weapons. Whatever you want to choose, you get flexibility. And then you could also go gunfighter. We can get an 8 attachment gun, which kind of is pretty useful when it comes to the meta stuff, because there's some guns where it's like, ooh, I really wish this one had 8 attachments or 7 attachments even. Because 5, it still has enough deficiencies. This could solve some of those and actually open up the meta a little bit. It seemed like they had intentions of also modifying these floor loot perks as well as the floor loot in general, pretty much seasonally to keep that fresh, which has kind of been lackluster for the past 2 years. And they're aware of it. I had several conversations with individual devs that we're going to have way more changes than we had in the past couple years, where it's felt like it's been the most stale, and it should feel much more like peak Warzone, where it, in terms of variety in the meta. Also, just so I don't miss a bunch, there's a ton of quality of life stuff. I'll probably still miss some stuff in here. There's faster zips. When you get up to the top, it's a lot easier to use. Weapon rarity is outlined. So it's kind of like a hybrid floating loot system where some items are floating and some are on the floor, but then they're outlined a little bit better. I still prefer floating loot altogether, but a hybrid system isn't terrible. Mantling improvement, so that's simplified. Downed players don't trigger high alert. Also, downed players can pick up a self-revive. If you crawl over to one, you could get one. I don't know how often that would be used, but there it is. They also made some modifications to high alert, so you'll have to see those when you get in game. They added a sound effect to the bounty level for better awareness. When the threat level becomes from 1 to 2 to 3, you'll get an audible cue in addition to the visual one that the bar changes. They minimized the loot card, so everything is a little bit less cluttered and covering up your screen. That's an improvement. Pinging loot, it'll actually help navigate your team to that specific location. If it's underground, it'll kind of give them a little bit better directionality. And they also shorten the ping, so they don't last quite as long. Sometimes you could ping, they go around the corner, a little bit overpowered. And on top of that, the perk that pings them it's going to be less too. So you kind of have a little bit more balance. And these are like things that we were asking for a while, even in addition to the base Warzone. These are things we complained about back then, but we're actually seeing some of these changes happen, obviously pretty late down the line, but they're better than what we had originally, even in Warzone 1. On top of that, we're getting an updated firing range. I was hyped about this one. There's going to be more stats on the top corner. Instead of just the accuracy and dummies hit, you're going to have damage numbers. You're going to also have Warzone perks are actually active in the firing range. Right now, if you go to the firing range and you have double time on, or you have sleight of hand, or you fast hands or whatever, you go in there and you don't have any perks. Now, whatever you have equipped is exactly what you will have. So it'll be 1-to-1 in that sense, where you can actually test to see, well, how much is this perk actually helping? You'll be able to feel it in the build. If it's going to live ping or outline or whatever, you'll also have those effects in the firing range. On top of that, the dummies are going to respawn faster, which is awesome, because that little delay is kind of annoying. Dummies will also be fully plated with default values. This is finally, I know a lot of people comment on it, but the values were never accurate, so it's like pointless to put on plates just for the sake of it. And that includes like the snipers one-shotting when they're supposed to and not. That hasn't been a thing all of Warzone. It's like, how? But now it's coming, it's gonna get fixed. Warzone specific weapon details. So it'll have the values specific to Warzone, because like I said, it's been errored right now where it's mainly multiplayer stats in Warzone. So it always kind of throws it off. Those are a lot of details, but we haven't talked about the new map. So all those things are generally positive. We came a little bit of negatives somewhere in the mix. We'll have another list of negatives here pretty soon. But the new map, I was fortunate to play the map probably like 2 weeks ago before COD Next. We gave, it was a smaller group, and we gave feedback then, and the feedback very much aligned with the feedback when it came to the live broadcast. They're like, oh, it's kind of dull. Yeah, we told them add more color. They're going to add more color. It's already planned. It's just they couldn't fix the color situation in 2 weeks. It's going to be there though for season 1. Hopefully they're dropping all kinds of screenshots once it's polished and finished, with all that color and saturation and pop, and making each PUI feel unique with color scheming and those types of things. Loot, name, all these different effects that we talked about and just couldn't make it into the COD Next build. It has to be a stable build for an alpha. Season 1, when we get this map and it drops, and it's going to be Resurgence, and it's going to play like Rebirth Island in a lot of ways, it's going to have those things, and we're going to get probably a blog before then that says, hey, look what we did with the map to make it look great, so that that gray dull image isn't like the lasting impression people got, even though it is unfortunate that that's what a lot of people will have. The map, I think overall is pretty solid. It's Treyarch map. That means it was designed and built by Treyarch. I saw some people were like, Treyarch doesn't know how to design maps. I'm like, bro, do you even play COD? Treyarch definitely knows a lot about how to design maps, and there's a lot of intentional design choices. The underground is built very well with very deliberate action on how it was designed, versus something like a Chico where it's just like, oh, there's water, there's some tunnels, and we just kind of had to throw something together. At least that's the way it felt. This seems very intentional. Even some of the different height lines of sight, you have to over challenge. So it's not like you're on a dedicated head glitch, even though there are some head glitches on the map and some annoying spots, but that's going to be on every map, right? It's just kind of how it is. Rebirth had the tower forever, and people love Rebirth. It just is what it is, even though it gets blown up half the time. With that being said, I expect that map to be hyped. I know some of the people dropped over 20, 30 kills or something like that. So when you get into casual lobbies, when it's just regular players that are queuing up, there's people going to drop 40, 50, just like people do in Rebirth Island. Now to some of the negative. I do wish it was floating loot. I will say that. That's something but that's a nitpicky thing. I think this hybrid loot system is going to be fine. It's like not a deal breaker. We've got two years to deal with it. It's fine. The buy station UI, still trash. We just need to go back to the Warzone 1 version. I don't know if that'll ever be the case, but maybe someday. I don't know. I hate the idea of blueprints, that when you have a cool blueprint, you attach attachments and it ruins it. I think that's terrible. That's been an ongoing theme. SBMM obviously is an issue for certain players, myself included in that. I don't think that's ever going to change. It makes too much money. They put out their white paper that explained how it's leading to them making more money and player retention, all these things. So I don't see that changing, but it's still a gripe. I think no big map at launch is a big issue for people. Luckily, mid-season, you'll at least get ranked. The map will play completely different. Not having to throw tons of smokes. The meta is going to be completely shifted. It should be way wider. There's going to be a lot of things with the contextual diving that I don't think people are ready to really see until they play on those big maps. How different the map will play. for several different reasons. I think part of it too is the class setups. I think they leaned a little bit into it. I don't know if this is like a just conspiracy theorist, is that they said that there was going to be an overhaul sometime when the integration happened. As we saw in Black Ops 6, like 90% of the attachments don't have any cons. So I wonder if that's going to apply to MW2 and MW3 weapons. And on top of that, if that happens, there's some guns that automatically become way better. And then on top of that, some of these guns that maybe needed that 6th, 7th, or 8th attachment will be able to have them. So maybe an MW2 gun that was obsolete for multiple reasons, it may not be obsolete this time around. And that's kind of how I'm seeing it. Hopefully, maybe that's just wishful thinking, but that's kind of my general thought process. And then, like I said, ranked will be there, but that'll hopefully carry people over until Verdansk. I know there's a nostalgia factor, but people just generally like Verdansk. Just like people like Shipment, Nuketown, like Rebirth Island. It's the same thing. People just like a certain thing, especially COD players. I think generally people outside the genre or like a little bit more nitpicky on playing the same thing over and over don't, but people, you go to Shipment, it fills up in 2 seconds. People playing Shipment, even if it's just for dumb camos. The Verdansk is supposed to be hopefully around the 5th anniversary, which would be March 10th, even though they said spring 2025. That kind of coincides with there. Hopefully it'll be with the seasonal drop. And the other concern is the vehicle problem, right? We didn't see any vehicles on Area 99. I think by stock, it doesn't have any vehicles. So we won't know how that's changed. This is something that I've given feedback on for 2 years, that, hey, it's trash. A lot of people have. And unless it's the Hummer that's pay to win or whatever that they got paid to include, it's going to be an issue, right? And that links us to the elephants in the room, which are the stale meta. I kind of alluded to some of the things, but I had several conversations with a lot of people that were definitely different than last year's conversations. And there was very intentional, deliberate conversations about how the meta will be less stale. I can't really go too much into it, but just expect a much better meta distribution and less staleness. There will always be that one weapon that is slightly better than other ones, but the gap has been so large this year and it's been so stale that I wouldn't expect that same thing this year. And the other big elephant, Ricochet. There's no talk about Ricochet. You wouldn't really expect it at COD Next. Hopefully there's a blog at some point. I don't think people really trust regardless. There's people that hate it. They think it's good. Some people think it sucks. A lot of people think it sucks. Shadow ban system is part of that. I don't know. I don't know what to tell you about that. I did a full video talking about that and the meta. At least the meta is getting ill-addressed. I don't know about Ricochet. I mean, it is what it is. Now into my final thoughts. I'm excited to play again. I will say that. If you've been watching the streams in the channel, I mean, I've limited myself to a certain amount of content that I will stream. I've been doing a lot of variety games, which I'll still continue to do because I'm a gamer. I'm gamer first. Before I was a Call of Duty content creator, gamer first. I've been playing games since I was like 3 years old. So I'm a gamer first. But a lot of people don't know this is back in Warzone 1, I didn't actually play the game a lot. People always assume I did. But when you spend 6 to 8 hours in the plunder, testing some bullet velocity, ranges, attachments, movement, ADS, sprint to fire, blah, 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 you don't actually have enough energy in the tank after making videos to go play the game for more time. So my play time right now this year, even though I don't play an insane amount, is actually more than I played back then because like 80% of my time was plunder. Like imagine just taking all of your playtime, chopping off 80% and making that plunder, and imagine how fun that could be. And not for the people that just play plunder, like literally just testing. And it was cool. I had a lot of fun with it. I enjoyed it. I would always prefer to play the game over testing, right? Like obviously. And then by the time we got to MW2, MW3, it's like everything's data mined. And if it's not data mined, True Game Data has stuff up. And it's like, okay, but the meta sucks. So it's like, damn, I can't play now either. And I have nothing to do. So now it's like the game should be good. The meta should be good. The testing will be spot checking. There's tons of tools with the firing range and shooting range. It's going to be, I think it's going to be awesome. But maybe I'm just hyper optimistic. I have no problem saying it sucks. If I'm wrong, I'll tell you I'm wrong when it drops, but I feel pretty optimistic. And I'm not just excited about Warzone. It's like all the modes. I think multiplayer is going to be kind of fire. Fast, arcadey, Treyarch, which I enjoy. Zombies, even though it's not for everyone. People want a hyper, like gatekeepy. I'm gonna enjoy it. It's like Cold War. I enjoyed Cold War. I did every Easter egg in Cold War. Did every Easter egg except for Declassified and BO4. We played zombies. I like zombies. And I did everything in MWZ, which should be a W. And then Warzone should be gas with an extra camo to grind. So the last thing I'll say is if you're on the fence, there's an open access beta. Just play the beta. That's how the Warzone's gonna feel. Try it without the boosted perks to see how the default version will feel. And then obviously once we get the... Warzone is free to play. Game Pass is available for the game. There's tons of avenues. I wouldn't hard sell. I'm not trying to sell you on anything. Try that crap. Try it for yourself. You'll find out and figure out what makes the most sense. Appreciate all the support. We'll see you on the next one. Thank you for watching as always. Have a great day.